Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Forestry Subcommittee meeting, final one for the year. Just a reminder that we are in COVID conditions, although we're not in the traffic light system, but there are some rules in place, particularly around social distancing and masks while not seated. So I'll just remind you to follow those rules, if you would, to keep us all safe. We do have COVID in the community, and it is quite a concern because that is a growing number. A little bit of inevitability about it, but it still doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be on our mettle. Also, we're live streaming, so if you are speaking, can you please turn your microphone on so that people can hear you outside of the chamber and through the system. So thank you very much. We have with us today Peter Gorman, Lockie Grant and Sam Nusky from Pierre Folson, Land Vision, and Peter Gorman's independent consultant, just to help us with the presentations today. And and without further ado, we'll move on. So first item of business is apologies. We do have one apology from Councillor Fulton for lateness, and everyone else is here. So could I have a mover to receive that apology? I'm happy to move it. Seconded, Mayor Rees. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Oh, of course. Welcome, Councillor Sanson. I forgot you're on the list there. It's welcome aboard. Confirmation of business, as per the agenda, there's no reason to change that today. Move straight to interest. Any interests to declare with items on the agenda? No? Okay, cool. In that case, we'll move to public forum, of which there is none. Item 5, confirmation of minutes. They are on pages 5 to 7 of your agenda. Could I have a mover, please, that they be received, I think. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Seconded by, thank you, Mayor Rees. Any discussion on the minutes? I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. I don't have a chairperson's report today because most of it's in the agenda, what I would comment on. So we'll just move straight through to item 7, high-level review costs. Now, just before we get underway with the main part of the business, there's been some questions emailed into the committee since the agenda went out. So I'll just ask Mr. Lavertis if you cover those off as best you can on our way through. Thank you. All right, so we'll go to item 7 to receive the report and consider the recommendations therein. So I'll hand it over to you to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you to the Chair. I'll take the report as read. There's no changes to the report. And I'll just outline very, very briefly the purpose of the report. So the purpose of the report is to give effect to the Council resolution of the 24th of June. I have sat with the team and we've come up with a proposal that's as presented in this report. There's a couple of streams of work. The first stream is to get a review of the Catalyst 2016 report review, and now that is underway. It's not available at the time of writing, as I've noted under item 4.4, but nonetheless that will be used when it is delivered to us, and that'll be sometime next year. To give effect to that resolution, I have proposed 2 streams of work. The first stream of work is the alternate commercial species assessment, which we were going to be doing anyway, and I'm proposing that we use Pierre Folson. But I've also proposed that we put checks and balances in place in terms of our ability to demonstrate transparency and independence by having specialist input into that report with regards natives, and those are discussed in the report, and then putting an independent review on top of that. The estimated cost for that is about $35,000. And then the Indigenous conversion, I've recommended that we, the second stream of work is to use Dr. Adam Forbes, and there's a little bit about Dr. Adam Forbes, well respected in the industry throughout New Zealand. He's done quite a bit of work for the Top of the South, and then I'm also recommending that that be peer reviewed. So there's a number of checks and balances. I believe that what is proposed will address the issues. all the recommendations of the council, and we will await, if the committee approves this, subcommittee approves this, then we'll get that work underway with the point of getting all that information together and then seeing what comes out of it. The total cost is in the order of about 74,000. That's excluding the peer reviews. I have touched base with the people that I've recommended to do the peer reviews, as well as all the other pieces of work, and they're all open and available to do that work. So I will leave it there. I'm happy to take any questions. Would you like me to address some of the questions that have come in? So the questions that have come in as to why this is not a recommendation to council, or council need to ratify this decision. My answer to that is, whilst council has resolved for this work to be undertaken, the matter, I believe, falls under the scope of the Forestry Subcommittee. But that said, it will ultimately make its way back to council when we look at the next rounds of the Forestry Activity Management Plan, of which this will all be feeding in. And the council resolution is very clear that we need to undertake this work that will guide the next Forestry Activity Management Plan. There was a question about, in the report, I referred to me having provided council an update that this was actually coming back to the subcommittee. My answer was yes, from memory. I recall probably on no fewer than 2 or 3 occasions I have given an update to council in various formats. And yes, the status report is a written, there will be a written status report that will come back to council. There was a question about the catalyst report and when that will be available. As I said in my opening view, probably sometime next year. What is the review that PF Olsen undertook for Gisborne? As I indicated in the report, PF Olsen did a similar exercise of assessing alternate commercial species for Gisborne, and that's why I'm saying we actually build upon that and going forward. There was a question about if PF Olsen are doing this work and they're currently our forestry managers, could there be questions raised around the level of independence of the review? I think my answer was yes, I think there could be. But the process that I've outlined in this report, I think, proposes a best value for money option on the work that PF Olsen has previously undertaken, and that I've put the necessary checks and balances by inserting and involving species specialists into the PF Olsen work and separate peer reviews. And I think I'm satisfied that that should be able to dispel any questions of bias. There was an observation made about specialists in Totara, whether we use Tane's Tree Trust or Totara Industry Pilot. I indicated that we haven't landed on who we would use for Totara, but that I would forward that on to PF Olsen. And with regards to Tane's Tree Trust, I noted that Jackie, who we are recommending to do the peer review, has very, very close links to the Tane's Tree Trust anyway. The question was, are we expecting recommendations back from the peer reviewers? If yes, would there be merit in having the peer review done by the same person? For example, Dr. Jackie Amers peer reviewing both. My comment is yes, I think that has merit. But what I have proposed is a 2-system independent peer review system, and I think I am still happy with that. Not to say that one peer review wouldn't do, but I think having another independent view has its merits. Will the decisions, the next questions, will the decisions that flow from these reviews come to council for decision making? What is the expected time frame? My answer to that was yes, ultimately this will come back to council through the next round of the AMP and their long-term plan work, and that will be sometime in late 2022 and 2023 as we prepare for the next long-term plan round. and that is consistent with the council resolution. The last question was, council has commenced harvest on blocks that it currently intends to replant in pine. However, if council decides to adopt a different approach to land management on the basis of this review, is there a chance that these blocks would not be replanted in pine, but in other exotic or indigenous species? If yes, how do we avoid unintended consequences and wasted resources? My answer to that was, as noted to both the subcommittee and council on several occasions, and I also link that back to the council resolution, that this work that we are undertaking will guide a future forestry activity management plan and hence the LTP. But until such time as that work is done, we will continue to harvest and replant in pine, as opposed to stopping with the work program that we've got. So through the chair, those were all the questions with regards to that report. And I'm happy to take any questions on any matters that I've raised.
Right, well, thank you for the report and thank you for having a look at those questions and considering them further. That's fantastic. I'll open it up to the committee for questions. Any questions? Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, just applaud the work we're doing. I'm just conscious it seems some of it's really doubling up on work we've already. So I applaud what we've done, but it doubles up on what we've already done a lot of in regards to seeking out alternative species, etc. And I hope we, as mentioned there, hope we're going to be looking seriously also at the effect on the region's workforce and industry too.
So through the chair, two questions there. So we haven't done any work on alternative commercial species, so that's a new piece of work.
Okay.
The indigenous conversion we had done previously, but I think that the process that I've outlined here will add on to that work that both Pierre Folson, Lockie and Peter have done to confirm that. And as part of both those works streams, there will be, I have asked, when I asked those individuals for their quotes to do this work, is the effect on the supply chain and the number of people working in the area. Yes, so it will be a comprehensive view on each of those.
Very good. And regards to, so you're looking at different species. You said eucalyptus, redwood, manuka, I see. And what was it about totara that was?
If you look at 5.2, we're also considering totara and cypress.
Yep.
And we will include those. And as I indicated, Councillor Sanson has recommended a specialist for totara, and I will forward that on to PF Olsen to consider. But yes, does that answer your question? And
last question. I know TDC with their forestry, and they also get a very good return and surplus like ourselves. I see they made a 4.1 million surplus, excluding distributions of 1.8 million. Can we not tag on, but see some of the results and research done over in TDC when they're a similar situation with their forestry? And I know pine is going incredibly well at the moment with export prices, etc. Are we not doubling up on work that may have already been done by TDC, or is there anything there we can tap into?
So through the chair, I don't believe TDC have undertaken any aspect of this work. I think they're only involved in their forest. This is as far as we know, and Pierre Folson also managed TDC. So this work has been done in Gisborne, but TDC aren't considering, as far as I know, removing any of their forestry plantations out of pine.
Yep. And just the last bit of commentary and maybe a question and feedback on the expertise around the table. I see like eucalyptus, redwood, manuka are all great species for varying reasons. I know with eucalyptus, there's always issues with our steep lands and getting wind blown easily because of their low, shallow roots. We only have to see that on their founders there on the hillside, the opposite there. And on the back of us, we have a brook where there's commercial forestry where they've got pine and they've also got eucalyptus. But the pine takes off incredibly quickly, but whereas the eucalyptus is very prone to our steep sort of conditions and wind and the windstorms, they just got knocked extremely easily. Not trying to put any advice in there, but I just tend to think a lot of that stuff would have been already done by other operators and by ourselves, and it would have been a good reason why we were looking at and pursuing species that we do.
Through the chair, that'll come out into the study, and I think what I try to do here is keep an open mind rather than us,
Very good.
excuse me, formulating upfront and saying this won't work, this won't work, this won't work, this will work.
Very good.
I think we need to just keep an open mind on this. We've considered those species, and let's see what the experts say, and if it comes back, and those may be a whole lot of reasons as to why it's not good.
I appreciate that. And Redwood's got a
But
lot.
we didn't want to preempt the thinking
Redwood's got
on
a lot
this.
of promise. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a question, Councillor Sansom?
Yeah, thanks very much through the chair. So in terms of the review work in Gisborne undertaken by Pierre Folson, I'm just wondering when that happened, what year, and what the outcome of that review was?
That was in response to the Tulliga Bay floods, which occurred in February 2018, and I'm not sure when they completed it. It would have been in the year or two after that, and there was different recommendations made for certain high risk areas for either retiring or putting in alternative species. But I think it wasn't a high level thing like this, and it wasn't looking at all of the wide range of factors. It was more focused on economic reasons, because there were certain areas that were extremely unprofitable for the prime crop that fell away in the storm. So they basically just looked at it at a site specific as opposed to a high level basis and made different recommendations. And I believe Other Two Forestry in Gisborne did quite a big one as well.
So they did end up recommending some alternative species, and that was followed through on, was it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Good to hear. So I guess in terms of the report on page 8 or 9, 3.2, that council requests a report. So I'm just wondering, in the 21-22 financial year, so if council is requesting a report in this financial year, how is the proposed process actually delivering a report back to council in this financial year?
So through the chair, as I indicated, so what we're proposing here is that this work will be commissioned in 21-22, and this is the report. And as I said, I believe that while council have passed this resolution, that this delegation sits with this forestry subcommittee, and hence that's why this is here, which would then guide any work that actually comes back to council.
Okay, I think that that recommendation came through under the Treasury Management Policy, and specifically requesting that a report comes back to council. So is it, could there be, I guess, a challenge to process by it not coming back to council?
Through the chair, I've indicated we are with the process, and I can't comment on whether there could be a challenge. I can't comment on that.
Okay, but I mean, I guess, yeah. So I mean, I don't know the processes well enough. Obviously, I'm only 2 years into my role, but we need Councillor O'Neill-Stevens here, maybe.
So I understand that they've between the SLT and the people inside the building, they've had a look at that very, very closely. I'm very happy for it not to come here, Rachel, to be fair. But anyway, if it is, and that's our delegation, so that's where it's sitting. And I don't know if the mayor wants to comment further on it, but my understanding is that it's landed here. We're looking at it. We've requested the report as per the resolution, and we will action it for to inform the asset management plan, which is what the resolution says. So I'm not too sure, but wanting to move on if there's a challenge.
Yep. So I've got a couple more questions. So I guess the other thing then is that if this is the report on the review of forestry, I kind of think I've been trying to think about another situation similar to council. And I was thinking, if council had requested a review of, say, enforcement of dog control and parking. And then it was being recommended that the contractor who undertakes dog control and parking enforcement was actually the one doing the work. I'm wondering whether the people around this, the members of the committee that are around this table would think that that is appropriate to have that contractor kind of, I guess, doing the work stream for the review, because it seems to me this is a similar situation that council has requested this work, and it's being, which is looking at council's current approach to forestry, and yet we are proposing to engage council's own forestry managers in that. I just wonder if there's the potential for it to be perceived as a conflict of interest.
Okay, so I think
and the risk.
I think Mr. Levertis has answered that. First of all, this committee is not an independent contractor to the council. It is part of council because it is a subcommittee. So you can't say that we need to be independent of council per se, because we are part of council. That's the first piece. Second piece is...
No, I wasn't talking about the committee.
Yeah, well, it's
talking about the
committee
contractors that we're using.
Okay, and so Mr. Levertis' answer to that is that it's best expertise on the base level with a peer review to ensure that that independence and objectivity is safeguarded, is the word that I had for that. And so, and I suppose it'll be up to the committee to decide whether they're comfortable with that. I certainly am comfortable with that. Often in conflicts scenarios, it's not about the conflict, it's about how you manage it. And in my view, this has got good management practices behind it to ensure the integrity of the work that's coming forth. And that's what we want. We want a good report with integrity. We're all on the same page around that. So, my reading of it, the process, the positioning of it, how it's flowing through, all stacks up. Mr. Levertis could have come back and said, "I know, we'll get Olsen's to do the work." He hasn't said that. He's actually expended more money to make sure that it's done with integrity.
Yeah, and I want to also acknowledge the thought and consideration that has gone into that. And so then I guess in terms of having the two streams of work and the two different peer reviewers, I imagine that, and I think from Mr. Levertis's response to my question, that a decision from those peer reviewers, or there will be a report or work from those peer reviewers that will inform this subcommittee or council, wherever it goes. So I just wonder if there is merit in having the same peer reviewer actually review both the streams of work, so that that peer reviewer can actually give an informed view, because otherwise you're not really comparing the two different, you've got two peer reviews coming from different people that are not really, you're not having one independent person looking at both streams of work. And I just wonder if there is merit in having one peer reviewer looking at both streams of work and then giving a recommendation to the committee.
I'm going to disallow that question on the basis that it has been asked, and Mr. Levertis did answer it in his address around the reason why he's got different peer reviewers in there. I believe Mr. Levertis acknowledged that could be a position that you could use the same peer reviewer, but on this occasion he thinks it's best if we use two different ones, and that's his advice to us. So I'm happy for the committee to consider that on that basis. But again, could I just ask that you stick with questions that are potentially new and not recover off or try to litigate what has already been answered.
And then I guess I understand that council is, harvesting about $17 million worth of, projected $17 million worth of log sales in the next few years. And at the moment it's planning to replant those in pine. We have in front of us, two streams of work, the outcome of which could mean a different approach. And I guess I just want to flag my concern that by continuing to replant in pine when we have this work underway could create waste of resources or unintended consequences. And just would like to know if there's a response from the committee or from the chair around that, rather than from, is that not something that you feel concerned about?
That was a question that Mr. Laverse addressed in his response on the report. Okay, so asked and answered. If you would like my response to that, I would say, Rachel, very clearly that we do not know the outcome of this report at all. And I'm not prepared to preempt it, prejudge it, and or take any position relative to it until that report is there and considered as part of the FAM. So in the context of your discussion around that, then you could just as easily waste time and resource by not doing anything and progressing with your strategy as it currently sits. So it's a bob each way. And at the moment, our mandate is to continue on with that. And they've asked for my view on it. That's my view. I'm happy to go to others on the committee for their view.
Can I just clarify how, if council didn't replant in pine until this work was completed and an outcome was made, like a decision was made, how would that waste resource?
Because there will be areas that are not planted, they will revert back to gorse. They will not then be producing harvest income. So that's the flip side to what you're talking about.
Although we're only talking about probably a year or something. I mean, the review's going to be happening this financial year, so maybe even less than a year. So again, it's only a year that we're talking about. So at the moment, you need to wait. Now, I'm happy for other committee members' views on that. So, sure. I've just got one final question, and I hadn't asked it, but it just popped up when we were talking about this. I'm just wondering, in the terms of reference or the review, will carbon forestry be considered in the mix for both of those streams of work, just because of the economic implications of,
Would you like to answer this one, or should I? Okay, so again, this report is very much on the basis of the resolution from the long-term plan, and it's very specific in terms of that resolution as to what it wants looked at, and carbon was not part of the resolution. So the answer is no, because it's in direct reference to the resolution, as I understand it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so the answer is no, it won't.
Okay, so this is in direct reference to the resolution, and yet the resolution says a report will come to council, and that's not being followed.
Is that a question again?
I think I'm just trying to understand that on one hand,
again, this subcommittee is part of council, Rachel. Is it not? It's part of council.
Okay, my understanding was that when a report is requested to council, it came back to council. That might be my misunderstanding. Is that not the case?
Moving on.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Marys.
The process through the LTP, just to try and help, see if it's just help the understanding. We go through an LTP process and we make at council a whole range of decisions, and then those matters are then addressed through the delegation set to committees. And so if they are delegated directly to council, where council has control, things stay at that level. Otherwise, they go to the committees. And so where you've got functions set up, then do you want to just...
Someone's just joined us in the public gallery. I thought we were closed in terms of the building. Sorry, yeah, excuse me, sir. How are you here?
My name's Brad Chandler. South Forestry.
Okay. Have you got access to the building?
Yes.
Okay, you're aware of the protocols around COVID-19?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chair, so in terms of how the process works, it's the same. It's been very consistent. Decisions are made through the LTP, and they're now being transacted and worked through committees, whether that is the Forestry Subcommittee, whether it's the Community and Recreation Committee. I don't see all the matters that we made decisions on at the Community and Recreation Committee on my council agendas, and it wouldn't be a practical option to do that. So we rely on the subcommittees to then undertake the business. So that's doing exactly what it should do, and very consistently. I do just have a question though in relation to the wording. So one of the... I'm just about to, sorry. So in the resolution, the wording, just looking at the wording, it does read through there, Indigenous forest opportunities, climate leadership and innovation to inform the forestry activity management plan. So I just am wondering around the question around carbon and forestry, I would have seen that not necessarily out of step with that resolution. So just make a bit
So through the chair, I think, yes, so all of these will be undertaken with the climate leadership lens on top of it. I think the specific question was whether we're going to be doing, I don't think we're going to go into a lot of detail in terms of carbon on each of those, but there will be an overall view in terms of what those means, what each of those species mean for us in terms of with the climate lens, yes.
So I think as I read that, and I know this is a very complicated resolution of council. I do apologise for that, Mr. Levitas, Mr. Murray. So considering developing a regenerative forestry plan prioritising Indigenous forest opportunities, climate leadership and innovation to inform the forestry activity management plan and treasury management plan policy. I'm not confident that excludes carbon forestry, and I'm sorry, I should have picked that up earlier as I was reading the report. So I'm not sure that we would want to exclude that given what's there, but I'm not sure that is it going to be addressed in any event as we go through this work. What I'm trying to think about as you go through the process, is that not a consideration that the review will undertake? So we're looking at, as we're looking at Indigenous conversion, as we're looking at alternative species, we would have to have a consideration around carbon in that process, I would have thought.
So through the chair, actually, I did address that in item 5.1, where I describe those other complementary works on the two streams, where I say all work will be again be undertaken with a climate change adaptation and mitigation lens. So there will be an oversight of that on each of those streams of work, yes.
All right, so then Councillor Sampson's question about will consideration of carbon forestry be part of this process? Is that in or out? I'm not clear.
That should be a yes.
It will be a yes, yes.
So we would have it in. Okay, so we'd make sure that so that should be, if we're doing that, I think it would be appropriate that we are considering that. So in that case, in terms of how you've set this up, in terms of the different streams and the cascade and reviews, you feel that can fit within that model?
I do, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, that's good to know. All right. And then there was another question. I don't know what it was now. Oh dear, I've gone a bit of a tangent. So yes, so just in terms of what we're doing, I think it's where it needs to be, and it will come back to inform the forestry activity management plan, which is delegated to this committee. And then all of those matters, then if there are recommendations to be made from that relate to the treasury management policy, then that will then be recommended, that will then be informed across to where those delegations lie. So I think it's fine with it coming back here. It should come back. Just in terms of the issue of whether there is a conflict of interest and the sort of comparison between two, is this like asking the company that is responsible for dog compliance, asking that company to do a review of its own performance, like a 17A review? I don't think that's the same thing we're dealing with at all in this case. So I don't think that's the comparison. I think what we've got here is that we've got a company that has extensive experience in the issues that we want to look at in terms of a governance direction to go and look at those issues, and is capable of doing that work. And I think that's the approach that we're taking. It's not like we're doing a review of the performance of the contractor. We're asking for the expertise and capability across a range of areas. And in this case, it's around alternative species, commercial species that can be that are appropriate, and that seems to be a logical way to do it, to use the value proposition that we've got from an organisation that understands our land and what we're working with, and then has experience doing that similar work as you've got in the report for Gisborne and the SC accreditation, but I think appropriately you've got an independent review in there. So I think that's, you know, using the knowledge and capability, and then you're making sure you set the independent review process in place. So I'm comfortable with that. I think that's robust in terms of what's being proposed. And similarly, I mean, I think in terms of the company that you're using, it's a company I'd hold in pretty high regard, very capable person. So good choice. And I'm happy with that. In terms of our, the work that's in front of us, we've got a direction that's set and signed off by council through we've got the forestry activity management plans, and all those processes have informed the LTP. And we are a function of those decisions. So we need to continue with those decisions until told otherwise by council. And so we have to apply what is sitting there. There is never so that's the approach that I'm taking. I'm not able in this subcommittee to, I think we've worked our way through that. I think we've got enough information in front of us, and I think we've got the plan that we're proposing today. I noticed that it didn't pick up that latest discussion that we've had around the emissions trading scheme, but then I'm really conscious that that's in the current financial year, and this is the signing off. It's always a bit of a lag time, and you try and pick up what you can, but it should sign off at the point we did the LTP sign off, noting that these are always living documents, as Mr. Lavertis has said, and so they'll have almost an addendum of updates that sit alongside them, and then they will get flow through into the process. I would like us to have a system where we had real living documents and continuous updates from every decision, where it could be live into the AMPs, but we're not quite at that point yet. I think the next iteration will be there. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fulton, welcome.
Apologies for my lateness today. Look,
Already been received.
Thank you. Look, I think the Mayor's probably covered off most of my questions. I just do want to tease out the carbon forestry question, which has been asked a little bit. So page 34 of the agenda, 1.8 summarises that. Is 1.7, which is in yellow, have you added, is that new writing which has been added in?
So through the chair, we're not on that report.
We're not on
yet.
that.
Oh, sorry.
You're too far ahead of us.
Oh, sorry. Where's one before?
We're still on item 7, the high level review. We just
High level review. Okay, apologies. I can save my question for that, for the next round. In which case, I'll hold my question for that report. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. Any comment? No. Okay, we'll just move then. Is the committee happy if we take all 3 recommendations as one? Yep. Okay, you happy to move that, Councillor Skinner? Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayoress. We've moved and seconder. We'll move to debate.
Can I just confirm that I can't vote? Is that right? Because I'm not on the subcommittee.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So, any debate on the motion?
I just want to thank Ms. Lavertis for the work that you put into what is a really complex resolution. We talked about that before, and I think this is very valuable work to do. I think it's important that we do, refresh that catalyst work and see what is there. I know Mr. Gorman's talked to us previously about some of the challenges that we have with the soil types and other matters in terms of options for this land, but I think it's timely that we go and do this piece of work.
Any further? Councillor Fulton, you still have your light on?
So I'm just going to make an assumption then that it's been noted that this piece of work will include the carbon forestry piece, because I think that's been noted quite clearly probably in the minutes. Could we have that noted in the minutes, please? Yeah, look, it's a exciting time in terms of how we transition our forestry into more regenerative practices, look for opportunities, look for climate leadership. So I do think that even though it's quite a wordy resolution, I think it's excellent when I reread it. I think we did quite well on the day to land where we land. And I think that all around the country, this is sort of the future of forestry. We're thinking about how we improve and how we seek to incorporate Indigenous forests into our forestry planning. So I'm looking forward to having that piece of work done, and really hope we can utilise our land in that way. I know it's steep and I know it's difficult, but look forward to hearing the review.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, no further debate on the topic. You've got your light on, Councillor Skinner. Cheapers. Always going. Okay, I'll put the resolution then as a group. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Levitas, for putting that together. I reiterate the mayor's words. I understand it was a very difficult piece to put together, and you've done well to navigate through that. And I think we'll have a great outcome. So looking forward to it. All right, we'll move to the next item. Item 8 is the activity management plan on pages 14 to 63. Just before you, I'll just let you go and talk to it. Thanks, Mr. Levitas.
So through the chair, this is a procedural item, I guess, and we have to take all our activity management plans back to council, and the forestry activity management plan is no different. The only difference is that it has to come to this committee to be approved to go to the council, because it does. This committee doesn't have the delegations to approve the actual AMP. That's only the authority of council. The report is self-explanatory. What it does is it reflects the update from the LTP. And to answer Councillor Fulton's question, yes, all amendments as noted on item 4.1 additional and as have come out from the LTP are included in the yellow within the AMP. And I draw your attention to the items that have been added. The first one is the purpose of the plan. So that was previously approved. So that just reflects where we currently are. Councillor Fulton also asked me under the introduction on page 27 of the attachment to upgrade and to just expand the words a little bit more from what the outcomes of the Catalyst report is, and I've done that. That's all in yellow on page 27. The next change was item 1.7 on 33. Now, this wasn't specifically requested, but I thought it was pertinent to bring us in line with all other AMPs to have an item in terms of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, because that is clearly a priority of our council. And then item 1.8 is the future works, which reflects the council resolution dated on the 24th of June to include that. And then I have also updated the financials in the report to reflect the latest, and that's a moving feast. There were a couple of questions from Rachel Sanson, but through the chair, I went through the questions and then I think they were asked again. So perhaps rather than double up on that time, I'll wait for maybe Councillor Sampson to ask those questions and then answer them. And I'm happy to do that. Other than that, I think it's I'll take the report as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'll go to questions. Any questions? I'll go to you first, Councillor Fulton, because I'm sure you had one about 1.7.
Yes, look, Alec, what you've written is a really, really great start. I just wanted to clarify, to me, the resolution in 1.8, which is developing a regenerative forestry plan, prioritising Indigenous forest opportunities, climate leadership and innovation, is part of our climate change and greenhouse gas emissions response. So it sort of sits a little bit within 1.7 as well. And I just wanted to understand in 1.7, it says this AMP will look at better understanding its forestry activity greenhouse gas emissions with respect to its carbon footprint. How do we link that to the future works more strongly, or is that going to come through in the next AMP?
So through the chair, this will guide the next AMP. So this work that we've just approved under the previous report will all link into that.
Okay, so why does it say this AMP?
Because the AMP is a living document.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean the AMP of 2021 to 30, okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's good, sorry. I just felt like if it was going to look at it, it hasn't done it.
It's an ongoing piece of work, and I've just incorporated that into the AMP to reflect that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I have 2 more questions. When we go back to page 27, which is the Catalyst Group, the sort of expansion of those words, which is really helpful. Councillor Sampson's asked a couple of questions in the past about forests which are being cut down now, and the intention is that they'll be replanted with pine for commercial reasons. And I was a bit late, so I didn't hear the full question, but there was a question about whether we can hold that off until we've done this review, which we're doing now. And your reply was that it's about a year. Is it possible to delay harvest, or is that all set up in the pipeline already?
So through the chair, it's not possible to delay the harvest. So we're well on our process of harvesting up in the Marsden, and the planning is well underway to commence harvesting up in the Roding. The problem, as the chair indicated earlier, that what we have on our books at the moment is that we will harvest and replace pine. That's what the commercial forestry is. The bits of work that we're undertaking, and the previous report is part of that, will be undertaken, will reflect how we go forward on the next forestry activity management plan. So, and that's over the next 2 to 3 years. It's not just next year. It's over the next 3 years as we do our forestry activity management plan and the next LTP.
And can any of those stands which are being replanted with pine be seen from the city?
Can they be seen from the city? I don't know, but I guess it's not just about whether they can be seen from the city. It's whether they're harvesting, then they remain susceptible to weeds. They have to be soil stabilization, a whole range of things. I don't think any one of us would recommend that we harvest and not replant.
If we were of the mind to change direction and not replant with pine, and we wanted to look, so when I workshopped this many years ago, and I haven't obviously been on the Forestry subcommittee, we workshopped it, and the intention was that we kind of retired forests as they were planted. To me, that was how the wording was pitched. That the commercial aspect was that you were retiring, and
that's not what was.
That was my feedback in the workshop process. It might be quite different what the outcome was, but I'm just curious in terms of that commercial decision to replant in pine versus retire, and I know that you've looked at small stands versus larger stands. Have you also looked at the location of the stands with respect to waterways and with respect to the city? So when you went through that weighing up process of which ones to retire and which ones to replace, what other parameters were considered apart from the size of the stand and the commercial viability?
So perhaps you ask.
I can answer that. So through the chair, the 2016 Catalyst report went through a range of factors. I think there must have been about 10 or 12 in terms of arriving at the recommendation to council, where council resolved that they would retire about 25% of their commercial forestry. And in those particular cases where we are harvesting that 25%, we are replanting in alternate species. The remaining commercial blocks, when they are harvested, will be replanted in pine. But the criteria to address that 25% arriving at that included a range of factors, including financial, proximity to the city centre, recreation, ecological, a whole range of aspects.
Okay, thanks. And over what period of time is that retiring of 25%? Is it over the next 5 years that we will have retired 25% of our forests?
I'd have to revert to Sam. I don't know the time frame, but
we've been doing it progressively over the last few years, which has been good. And the big lot of harvesting we've just done up at the brook is all getting retired.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple more stands to do.
Okay.
Over the next few years.
And so if we wanted to, in the next round, retire 50% of our forest, if we sort of set this goal of retiring 25% over 5 years, or over 10? Was there a timeline?
No, I don't think there was a timeline. It was just, this is our overall estate and this is the area that we want to retire.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just seems a little surprising because it might be that over a 20-year period, we've decided we want to retire, like into the future, will we want to retire more forestry? When will we have that discussion?
So look, we've just talked about a report which will underpin those sorts of decisions. So it's a hypothetical question until we get the guidance from the report to make further decisions about what gets retired next, in inverted commas. So until we have that report, we were informed by that report. I don't think we've got any merit or anything further to discuss today around retirement policy moving forward.
Okay.
Because again, it's a wee bit like well, what can we say? We might be retiring 100% in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Who knows? We don't know.
So we'll make that decision when this report comes
the
out.
Report, I would imagine, the report will be used to inform such decisions. Because that's fundamentally what it's about.
Okay, so the intention of this report is that we then get to have that conversation after this report's prepared. We get to have that conversation at this committee level, and then it will go to full council as well.
So through the chair, the process is it's not just one report, it's a series of reports that will attempt to answer those questions that council has raised. It will come back to this subcommittee in the first instance, and it will be used to guide the next forestry activity management plan for the next 3-year cycle, which is what the council resolution requires.
Okay. So, last question. In the interim, there is some concern from the public that we're being a little bit short-sighted to replant for another 30-year harvest when we've got this piece of work being done. How are we addressing that? Because it could be that we are investing in a kind of forestry which we no longer want to invest in, which is a lot of time and money. How are we going to address the fact that we're harvesting right now?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. This is going over decisions we've already made, and I didn't turn up at this meeting to go over decisions and change decisions that we've already made. So a point of order, I think this is unrelevant to what we've got in front of us.
What's the point of order? I think it has to refer to one of the items on the standing orders.
I'm not here to cross-examine Rachel Sanson, and Rachel Sanson not just cross-examine this. But point of order again, I think it was.
Sorry, it's
As the reason for your point of order.
I'll ask who's chairing this meeting.
Yeah. So let's just okay. So thank you, Councillor Skinner. I will allow the question because it is the last one. Right. And so, but please, I don't want to be going over and over and over stuff. I think the point that is being made is that the forward process of what's happening in the forestry is pending further decisions and further reports. And until those go and inform them, we're business as usual. And that's been well discussed. But anyway, please complete your question and then we'll move forward. You won't get a decision from this committee, I don't believe, because we've got no paper, it's not actually the report. The report is approving the asset management plan, which has already gone through a process, and those sorts of submissions were considered as part of that process. And what we're doing now is approving this, the revised asset management plan on the basis of what came out of the LTP process, and that's what this document reflects. So the sorts of questions you're asking, as Councillor Skinner's pointed out, is sort of going over some old ground which have already been discussed as that part of that process. I understand.
Okay, but I was told that this document's a living document, and I would like to see a timeline. There's nowhere, I think a timeline is really helpful to inform the public, and I think it would be really helpful in terms of our strategic thinking about forestry to have that timeline. You can't put in an AMP that we're looking at better understanding our forestry activity greenhouse gas emissions and then be silent for the next 3 years on it. So we need to sort this out. We really, and I think that's perhaps my point, and I will debate on it if you'd rather, but I'm certainly not misinforming or misrepresenting any information, and I think it's important that I understand it. And we can go
So I'm
through
going to go to
things.
the Mayor, but again, my comment is that there was no timeline proposed at the time that we're putting the plan together, and nor was one suggested as part of the LTP process. So, and that's what this document reflects, and the word living might be somewhere, but at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no timeline about doing either additional retirement of blocks or those such matters, because there is a steps we have to go through, and that's the first what we dealt with, today. We've just started that process. The resolution from council is really clear. The timeline relates to the development of the next forestry activity management plan, because there is a major piece of work. If that was the outcome of the work, and we don't know what the outcome of the work is going to be, we're not predetermining that, we're doing that piece of work to find out. Once we've got that, then we have to consider that, and then we make our policy decisions from there that will then inform what happens going forward in terms of the work program, the activity management plan. But we have to go through a sequence to get there. Now, I know instant decisions are what everybody wants these days. I want it now, need it now, and I'm grumpy if I don't get it now. Well, it just isn't going to work like that. There isn't a process that's going to allow us to do that. We're going to have the information so we can make well-informed decisions, and then we'll step from there. And I think that's the fair way to do things. We've had Mr. Harrington come and talk to us on multiple occasions to say, if the outcome of the piece of work we're commissioning encourages us and provides us the platform to make decisions to start an indigenous forestry or an alternative species process, there's still a big piece of work to actually power up to do that, and it will take several years. It's got to be done over a number of years. He's been really clear he does not have the capacity to suddenly turn this around into something different. So I think we just have to work with that, and I do understand that it may seem like you could instantly make the decision, but I think we're all well informed enough to know that we can't do that. But we have commissioned a piece of work to help us have really good information in front of us for those decisions. So I'm happy to support what's there. It's the only reasonable thing that you can do given our role and the information that we've got to hand at this point.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was through to Alec Levinas. Just earlier on, when you were presenting a report, you mentioned, which is thank you, you've highlighted some parts there that you've extrapolated or put in on pages 27 and 33. And did you say that was added because it was something that we brought up at a committee meeting, or was it added because of the request of a councillor?
So through the chair, the yellow bits are as a result of the process of things that have been raised through workshops, through this subcommittee, through council, and with all AMPs. What we do is we bring everything that comes through from the LTP, we update the AMP, we reflect that, we bring it back to council, so that forms the cornerstone of work going forward. So what the yellow bits are here is a bringing together of all those bits that have been added in from the very first workshop to the LTP.
Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. So my question is in relation to page 29, 1.4, the section on carbon forestry. Because this is still we haven't yet adopted or approved this AMP. I'm assuming that there is still an opportunity to suggest edits to it, and maybe because I'm not on this subcommittee I can't actually do that, but I am questioning, given that council has recently agreed to assess and register all eligible council-owned and managed land into the emissions trading scheme. I'm just wondering whether it would be prudent just to include maybe one line in the section that Councillor Fulton was asking about, which was, I think, on page 27 or something, was it? So the section around climate change, or into this section on page 29 around carbon forestry, just one line to maybe reflect that a new decision or direction has been taken. And I guess I'm asking if that's possible and what the options would be there, because it then informs our approach to forestry for the next few years. Like, obviously, the trees and the carbon they're sequestering are of significant value. So I just wondered what the process is to potentially just have a sentence inserted into this whole AMP. I'm thinking of the next, assuming this is going to come to next week's council meeting, it would be really good to be able to have, for this to be adopted. But I think as it stands, I probably feel uncomfortable about adopting this AMP without reflecting that information. So is there any opportunity for that to be updated?
So through the chair, yes, there is. This committee can decide to, usually it's minor amendments that get added in at this stage. I did indicate to Rachel Sampson when I replied to her that an AMP is a living document and it reflects a moment in time. What the AMP in front of you today reflects everything up to the LTP, which is typically what it does. The recent resolution was post the LTP. The agenda, look, can it be added? It could, but how long is a piece of string? Where do we stop? A council resolution is still a council resolution, and it doesn't mean because it's not in an AMP, it's not going to be done. We still have to give action to that council resolution. As officers, we don't have any leeway over that. But this committee could direct me to make that a change. It's usually minor. But you could. I just an AMP is a living document, and where do we stop? Is what I ask. But this committee can direct me to do whatever they wish me to.
Look, I haven't got the council resolution in front of me. I'll just see if I can pull it up now.
Well, that's exactly my problem. I wasn't part of the council meeting or don't have the resolution myself either. So
I've got it. Yeah. So it's basically we're agreeing to do some work. So we haven't done it yet. So what we've done is we've agreed to do that, but we haven't made a decision. There's a whole lot of there's no management plan actions from that yet. Does that make sense? So there's an agreement to undertake the detailed assessment of all council land under ownership and management for eligibility in the ETS, and request that eligible council land and managed land, including exotic forests, be registered into the ETS scheme. So that's what for 1 April. So we've got that registration factor, but we haven't made the decision yet. So we've got to do this other piece of work that sits in there, and then we'll have a sense of whether we're going to stay registered or not. So there's nothing wrong with noting, given there's a whole thing on emissions trading scheme, just making a noting. I don't think there's anything wrong with making a noting addition to go, that's the step. It's very short. It's not a big piece that we've done that, but it's yet to inform what sits in here. So this stands at this point until such time as we've got, because we're going to take that step. So we know that. In terms of what then happens is, and whether we remain there and we rerun the analysis, because remember we've done a bit of that work. That's still got to happen. But the registration will be putting in the eligible land. So if there is eligible land for ETS in here, which there is, then that will go in. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with noting that, because that direction's been given. If there is eligible land there's been a subsequent decision of council, and if there's eligible land, it will be registered. That's it, really. That's kind of the
okay. So I suppose that's before I go to Councillor Skinner on the matter, you're proposing an amendment that we essentially approve the forestry activity management plan subject to a minor addition around the ETS in accordance with the council resolution.
Often we'll have a clause allowing for minor amendments to be made. I don't have to try and wordsmith it here and stick it where it needs to go. There's
Yes.
probably some really logical places, but
So we don't have it at the moment. So
we
what
just
we would need to do
allowing
is,
a minor amendment
yeah,
to be
subject
added,
to
subject to.
number 2, approves the forestry activity
I don't really
management
mind.
as a version to be forwarded to council for approval, subject to minor amendments. It's agreed at the meeting.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that input. Councillor Skinner.
Nothing really to add, but the query was, I'm just a bit concerned with sort of subtly changing the decisions we made. I noticed the question from a councillor was that council has decided to register and assess all our foresters for ETS. That is not the case. We decided to assess. We have not decided to register, unless I've got that wrong.
We did decide to order.
Okay.
That's I'm sure it's not intentional misrepresentation, but.
Sorry, Councillor Sanson, but you're not a member of the committee, so I'm not sure you can actually call a point of order. But having
Okay,
said,
sorry, I withdraw it.
Well, let me put this another way. Have we decided to register all our foresters for the carbon ETS? Eligible. We haven't decided to do it all. We've decided that we're assessing it.
No,
Right.
we've decided that sorry, Mr. Chair. So we have, we're doing the detailed assessment.
Yep.
And to identify eligibility,
Correct.
and then we will register
That which is
all
eligible.
eligible land
Correct.
into the ETS, and there will be eligible land here.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm correct in that, I think. I'm correct. Yeah, there will be eligible land, but the registration is, it's a step, and as we said, we can then go to the next considerations and decide what we're going to do, and we can deregister with a de minimis amount of money that we have to do that. So sorry to interrupt him, but just in the interest of time, because I thought it was going to be quite a quick meeting. I just think if we wanted to make that amendment, we just pick up that resolution from Council Alec that we've got, and then Councillor Sanson's suggestion, I think it's a reasonable one, it would work here on page 34, just add into the future works where we've got that council at its 24th June meeting, and we could just do council edits, whatever date, November meeting, and then it's there. It'd be much easier than trying to shoehorn it into the section.
Yep, I'm happy to.
Okay.
I'll
All right.
liaise with the chair to do that.
Okay.
yeah, thank you. All right, excellent. Thank you. Moving on. Any further questions on it? Do want to keep moving? Okay. Where'd it go? It's disappeared. Okay, so are we happy to take that as a block resolution then, 1, 2, and then the recommendation to council? Does the second one at the bottom, that council adopts that picks it up, the revised forestry activity management plan, because it will be revised by the time it gets to council?
That's good.
Happy to pick that up? Nothing. You had it right in the first instance, subject to the minor amendment as noted at the meeting.
And just to clarify, what is the amendment, the minor amendment that we?
It's the insertion of the council resolution that was made a couple of days ago into the document, essentially. Yep. Yep, okay. Can I have a mover and seconder for that cluster? If you're happy to go in the cluster, yes, thank you, Mayor Rees. That's moved, seconded. No, I don't want you to do anything. I'm happy.
I'll second it. You're looking at me with eyes like, come on,
Well,
are
it's
you
not
paying
that-
attention?
There's not that many people in the meeting, so.
I'll second that.
Okay, all right. So we've moved and seconded. I'll move to debate. Any debate on the motion?
I'll speak really briefly.
Sure.
Look, I'm going to support this activity management plan. I do appreciate that this is a living document, and I think that we should perhaps be using that opportunity over the forthcoming years to turn those future works into the body of the document itself, and sort of recognise that perhaps some of our most recent resolutions potentially almost opposite direction to the resolutions of 2016. So we're kind of doing a slight
diversion on our course in terms of understanding forestry. And I think it's important that we try and keep our activity management plan up to date in that regards. I also think that in terms of the process and taking the governance table along on the journey, we often get told you're too early and then you're too late. And for me, that's somewhat frustrating. We workshop and people say it's going to come and it's going to come and the piece of work's going to be done and it's coming. And then we get told, oh no, this is for the work we did in March, and so now you're too late and you have to wait another 3 years. I think that maybe, Alec, you can take note of that can create some frustration for the governance table, and that we are trying to work with the system, but we need a bit of help to get that right. So hopefully in the next process we get that right. And I personally still don't understand how we would, apart from preparing a motion, how we would stop the existing forestry from not being replanted. So I think that there is some things which need to be teased out in terms of supporting elected members to understand the process better.
Any further debate? Yes.
Sure, I'm really happy to support it, and I don't agree that the elected members haven't had the opportunity to understand the process. I think Mr. Lavertis has spent an inordinate amount of time actually working through this, going around this, sorting it out. I just think that's, I don't think that certainly doesn't reflect my observations and experience of actually going through this process. And I really think that there's been, but there has to be a governance direction, and there hasn't been a governance direction. And there's been plenty of opportunities to work through that and do that. I think we've got some really good steps forward in here, and I supported our LTP decision to do that review, and I think that's a really good step to do. So that was a good step. So I just am a little disappointed with the criticism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No further debate. I'll put the motion in. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Excellent. All right, thank you for that. We'll move on to forestry update number 17. Mr. Lavertis, over to you.
So through the chair, this is the normal update. This is okay. So through the chair, this is the normal update of that we bring to the forestry subcommittee. We usually work through this item per item. So in terms of the harvesting, so the progress on the bridges, the work on the Maitai is complete, and the bridge is being used. And the roading, the works will commence once consents have been secured, and that's as advised to you as the chair. There have been some delays in securing the building and resource consent for the roading bridge, but we are working with council to ensure that that is expedited, and once those are received, then we will commence work on those bridges, on that bridge. Happy to take any questions, or do you want me just to run through that as we go?
Oh, I suppose it's a point of comment. I'm a wee bit surprised that the resource consent is still outstanding. We've been working on this for quite some time. So, look, without delving directly into it, I think it's a point to note that we need to move forward with these things, and we need to consent. So hopefully we've given them all information, and it's not at our end.
It's not at our end, and we are awaiting the resource consent. Yeah. An
adjournment? Okay. I think we'll adjourn the meeting for a brief break. Thank you. Welcome back. We'll just pick up item number 9. Hand it over to Mr. Levitis. I believe we were at bridges moving to the Brook Tangier harvesting. Thank you.
So through the chair, yes, as I said, the Mai Tai Bridge is completed and looking very good actually. The roading bridge, we will commence those work once consents have been secured, and I think there's a number of questions, and I think I'll revert to Sam to answer those on that item.
Thank you. Sam, just in terms of that, those bridges, I know you were having issues with trying to get engineers time to get the design work done. Do I take it that all the design work has been done?
Yeah, so with Mai Tai, all the consenting went pretty well in the front end. We got all of our documents and to the timeline we needed to, based on expected consenting timeframes.
Right.
Although at the back end of the consent, achieving building consent was problematic, and I believe that there was pretty big delays with the building consent team, and that did create flow-on effects with the harvest.
Right.
As we had to store logs on multiple skid sites while we waited to be able to use the bridge.
Oh, okay. So because it still needed signing off from under the building consent?
Yeah, the certificate.
Okay. So I did it? Okay, all right.
Yeah. And then with the roading, we submitted our resource consent application back in August, I think. And you're still awaiting draft conditions now.
Oh.
Sorry, we've had draft conditions 2 weeks ago.
Gosh, that's okay. So were there any further information requests on that one? Is it no? So the clock's just been running.
There wasn't an acknowledgement of
receiving it either. Oh, okay. No, you didn't have it acknowledged when it went in?
No, nothing.
No.
But despite, multiple contact, yeah.
Right, okay. That's not less than ideal. Just in terms of coming back, so have you had an estimate now of, so what's the cost associated with doing that? So you've had costs, obviously it's impacted the harvest for the Mai Tai in terms of storage. Do you have any idea what sort of costs that's created?
I wouldn't be able to pluck it off the top of my head, but the harvesting costed a lot more than it normally would have throughout the month. I haven't worked out the difference though.
All right, so you maybe come back to us on that if you could just have a bit of a look at that.
But while we're on the subject of consents at the Marsden Forest, our consent to salvage the windthrow is costing significantly at the moment as we await the consent there.
Okay, so that's the consent. So that's different to this one that we're talking about in terms of bridges.
Yeah, that's a separate one.
So how many are you waiting on at the moment? You've got the windthrow one, the bridge one. Anything else?
So the Mai Tai's all done. Yes, they're waiting for the roading one and waiting for the Marsden
and the
Marsden harvest.
Okay, and that's because we talked about that quite some time ago.
Yeah.
So that consent's been lodged, has it? And and any further information?
Well, because of the urgency with the health and safety and environmental considerations with the Marsden, due to the recreational access and also the trees that are in the creek above the urban areas, we asked for the ability to fast track the consent.
Right.
And at that time, that was agreed to verbally.
Okay.
With the consents team. So based on that, we made decisions around the scheduling of the harvest crew and whatnot. So the harvest crew is now parked up idle and incurring stand down costs.
Oh gosh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe there's a piece of work here to do from the committee, actually, Mr. Chair, just in terms of this is always the challenging thing around the consenting process. But if this is actually now starting to cost us, and we've got delays and what have you, then we need to get some sense of if there's a problem when the problem is going to get resolved. So we've already got the problem and some costs associated, but we do need to have some sense of when. I think it's I think given that's not just one, it's a range of them. It sounds like a bit of a pattern, and we need to just see what the problems are formally. And I need some advice about how you would do that.
One of the additional constraints we face is the due to being a council activity that we're undertaking, they put additional levels of compliance, or not necessarily compliance, but checks and measures to ensure impartiality.
Yes, they'll need to do that. It'll have to be dealt independently. Yeah.
So that generally, adds another couple of steps in the process.
Right, but it doesn't change the timeframe requirements under the legislation. No. Okay. I might have to have a think about how we approach that. But it is. I don't think it's reasonable that our operations understand the checks and balances, and that's really important to have that independence, because it is council consent, council processing, but that's a standard part of operations here. It must be. We must have multiple consents going through for infrastructure projects, so that should just be a matter of BAU. And I don't think we should have a system that adds cost and complexity. We should have a system that deals with the requirement around impartiality, but it shouldn't lead to cost and complexity. I wouldn't have thought that was that's not a cost-effective system for the ratepayers.
Not sure where to take that really, because we're just applying for a consent. We need it. We need to get it gone on for work. But if there's another side to us, I know Mr. Levertis has said to me on several occasions he can't influence that. So
no, it's not matter. Yeah, that's meant. But we do need to just know where we're at. So whether that's something for you as chair just to raise is. It may be that there are specialist skills or things that are difficult to get at the moment. We need to understand what the issues are, because if we're for the future going to have an expectation that we're lining up around the normal consent times, but in fact that's not going to be what we can expect, and we need to build that into the program to make sure we're not getting these carrying costs that Sam's talking about.
Yeah, and in the instance, for Marsden example, where it's a production situation, it was based on the timelines, agreed prior that we made decisions. If they had said, look, it's going to be an additional month, despite being upset about that, we would have rescheduled things and it wouldn't have created the situation. Yeah.
So through the chair, as a way forward, perhaps I can, through you, request through from Ms. Barton, a view as to where and how they are experiencing delays, specifically with regards to ours, so that we can actually report that back to the subcommittee in the first instance.
Yep, thank you. I'm happy with that, if that's helpful. Yep, okay. To the committee or to me? Are we just going to work away in the background on that one?
I think we'll work our way through it, you and I, and then we'll report back to the subcommittee in February, March, whenever the next committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Or if you feel there is something you need to report back, but if you feel that you can get the thing solved and get on with things, then that would be even better.
Okay. So through the chair, moving on, brook Chantragee harvesting. So we had a substantial and comprehensive update on that in the last forestry update, number 16. And this just reflects that the harvesting along with native planting and remediation of the Down Mountain Flat is complete. So that's just closing that loop for completeness.
Should we ask Mr. Grant for comment on how the replanting's gone? Need to have your light on, Mr. Grant.
Sure. Look, I think, I know that we've got 2 of the 3 blocks replanted from the harvest of last winter. Be interesting to see what the survival is going to be like come another month or 2 of dry weather. Both, they're all pretty tricky sites in the sense of the good sunny faces that will dry out. And they've certainly, I'm expecting quite a large amount of weed population to pop up in those areas too. The third site of that wasn't replanted, and that wasn't replanted solely because of the timing aspect of getting the replanting done. And also we obviously didn't have the trees on that front, but that will be replanted next winter of 2022. on that area. So, and I think in conjunction with that, I think one of the neighbours that you did some work on, we're going to do some prep work for them too. So it'll get a continuity going from one block into another on that stuff. I know that in terms of the Marsden Valley, that stuff there, Sam and I have talked about leaving a small buffer zone between the private land and the production forestry stuff that's going to be replanted in radiata. So we'll look at that in the next month or so too, in terms of what we actually do with that area, just to safeguard us in the future. In terms of, look, I think we talked about it last time. I know we've had quite severe deer damage on some of those blocks. Deer seems to be everywhere at the moment through this district for one reason or another. And I'm guessing that's continuing, particularly when we're planting species that actually generally aren't that palatable for deer, and they're still having a go at them. I guess it reflects probably the populations and the amount of feed that they've got or haven't got. Any questions?
So 2 questions, if I may. How many plants have we put in so far? Because this is above the brook that's been replanted in one of the blocks.
Oh, yep. Yeah, certainly the stuff above the brook, there's just under 10,000 plants went in there, and we also planted amongst the pines that have been poisoned. So that whole area has been replanted. And they're planted around about 1.7 metre spacings.
Yep.
And typically those scrubbier sort of species, those first colonising species to come through, the carnukas and stuff like that, with the ambition of going back in the future and planting some taller native species through those areas. It should look quite attractive in years to come, providing that the gorse in those areas doesn't beat us. But even if the gorse does beat us, it'll eventually turn through into native populations.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, in the other area, I think we planted, there's about 7,000 or 8,000 plants in the other area. I'm not quite sure what the name of that block is. Sam will be able to tell us, but it's not the one closest to the brook, it's the one furthest around. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so presumably your comment about pest management is one that's received inside, and it's not really something we do directly here on the committee, but it's somewhere else in council, Alec?
So through the chair, yes, I've got a separate piece of work happening on in the background, and it involves my 2 fellow group managers, because I know they're both experiencing issues with culling, and it covers their areas as well. So for us, it covers forestry as well as the water catchments under infrastructure. But there's a lot of work that Claire's doing, Ms. Barton and Mr. White, in terms of cemeteries and what have you. So I've got a high-level meeting with them, hopefully before Christmas. I've asked quite a few questions just in terms of trying to ascertain what the best process is moving forward. So it's certainly on my radar, and I've initiated those discussions, and hopefully we'll be in a position to be able to report back to this subcommittee as to where we're going on that matter.
Thank you. Excellent. Because obviously if we're getting 10,000 plants in, but they're getting chomped, it's not probably ideal.
It's expensive Christmas. The other one too, we've done some more weed control work up in the Codgers area for stuff that was planted 2 or 3 years ago, and supplanted 1 or 2 years ago. So yeah, that area should be looking quite good now. There's been some quite good growth rates going through on those plants. So it's becoming quite attractive. Certainly it's the jewel in the crown for the mountain bikers.
Excellent, thank you. All right, if there's no other questions for Mr. Grant, we'll keep moving.
The Maita harvesting, very short summary. Harvesting in the Maita Valley has commenced and underway. If there's any questions on that, then Sam will be able to provide that, but I don't think there's any issues, and it's underway. The Marsden harvesting, Sam indicated he covered that a little bit earlier in terms of the delay in consents, but they are undertaking work in there in terms of the remediation. But I'll let you update that, Sam.
Yep, so the resource consent covers the skid site, the formation of the skid site. So we've been able to commence some work, some felling of trees and other work around until we can get that skid site built. So yeah, we've practically commenced, just not full hog it into it. And yeah, we talking with the contractor, they feel really confident about doing the remediation on the slip areas. So feeling that that one will go really well and the public access will be restored once we finish harvesting. Although obviously with the delays now, that will extend past Christmas, and so we won't be able to open that to the public until in early next year now.
Question.
Just in terms of the not being able to give the public access, Sam, what are the activities that are impacted by that? I'm just wondering what communication we need to be getting out.
Just basically all of the recreational access through the Marsden Forest.
Okay.
So through comms, we're busy. We're dealing with Paul Shaddock. We've got that's on the social media. It's on our website. Parks Department are dealing with people like the hang gliders. So we are getting the message out there.
Yeah, and we've come up with a plan to. Yeah, I'll need to confirm, but we're working on a plan to give some access throughout the Christmas break, and then stop it again at the other end of the break.
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious that there are some sort of businesses that operate, just thinking about some of the business opportunities in terms of whether we've got concessions running up there, other things that through what is a busy sort of summer tourism season. It's a very popular area, so that's, yeah, I'm sure you're doing everything you can, but just hoping to get, when we say delayed, when do you think, I know this is the question going back before, is we haven't got the consent, so assuming that arrives, have we got a kind of an estimate of when this might be all done, Sam, based on?
Yeah, well, so we plan to be starting harvest 1st of November, and it's now 1st of December, so if we get it within the next few days, then yeah, if you basically just put it back a month, so it was going to be Christmas, so it would now be mid-February on the basis that we have a 3-week break. Yeah.
Item number 4. Item number 4 is just a standing item that we will leave on here just to make sure that the committee has oversight that once that work is done, that we will coordinate with Tasman Pine Forests in terms of replanting that area once they take our trees out, and they haven't indicated when they were doing that, so we'll just leave it as a standing item. Health and safety. So there were no formal health and safety work observations from us, but clearly I want to state that PF Olsen undertake numerous safe work observations in terms of their work practices, but this reflects specifically ones for us. Finance, so this report covers the annual report, and that's appended, as well as the council budgets, and then also the quarterly report, just as a result of timing, and that quarterly report is July to September, and Sam and the others will be able to answer any questions you may have on any of those attached documents.
Okay, so questions?
No, I'm happy to move what we've got here.
Thanks. We're almost not there yet, though, but I'll hold that thought. I'll come back to you.
I'm always switched on.
So presumably the costs associated with removing those trees up the top of the brook are in this financial year and sitting in the first quarter?
Yes, Sam, that's correct. The brook harvesting will be
in the first quarter?
In this quarter.
Of our current financial year now?
Yes.
Yes.
So with some of that work that did take place in the last quarter of the last financial year, did it not? I think it did.
A little bit, yeah.
There was an overlap.
A small portion of it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, it's been a big cost to us to undertake that work. I wouldn't call it commercial forestry. It's probably parks and reserves trying to obtain a bit of land so that they can protect Dunn Walkway, and we've contributed nicely towards their parks and reserves outcomes. So good on us.
Yeah, and it's a great outcome too. It's actually good for the estate to remove that and retire it, because overall the estate's going to go up in value by getting rid of those lower value stands.
Yeah. I suppose my point is, Sam, it shouldn't have been in this estate in the first instance because it was bought for the Dunn Walkway, as I understand it. So no, that's good. So that's those costs have come through and are in the report. So we've got those in front of us. That's excellent. Any further comment on your report, Mr. Levetis?
No, and then the alternative uses, and I think we've already traversed that with Mr. Grant earlier on in the meeting.
I'll take questions. No. Any further questions? Councillor Fulton.
I just wanted to confirm, when we talk about alternate species, you mean replanting an Indigenous species? On the table on 82, it talks about native species in the first box, but it doesn't refer to what's going to be replanted further down.
All those blocks going back to the native.
Okay. It would be really good if it says Indigenous rather than native in the text moving forward, where it's clear, and it may be alternative is used at the word Indigenous unless it's not Indigenous. We could, I just think for consistency, so the AMP talks about Indigenous replanting, and I think we need to be consistent with our terminology so there's no confusion if possible.
Okay,
is that possible?
Mr. Grant's writing the report. He'll amend accordingly.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. Oh, good. It's just I guess I assume alternate means Indigenous, but you might interpret it to mean something else. And so I just want to be clear.
If I was hearing you right, you were talking about the words interchangeable of Indigenous versus native, and I'm not quite sure what the difference is.
I think it's just, we just talk about Indigenous biodiversity in our MPS statements. So,
but then you went on and you talked about alternative species. So,
well, you refer to tables saying alternative species update, and I know in the past sometimes you've removed Pinus, you've removed. Didn't you remove something exotic, replace it with Pinus radiata, and that created some confusion? It was still regarded as an alternate species. I guess I'm just checking that when we're using the word alternate, we mean Indigenous.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Does that make sense? No?
So through the chair, yes, it did. You're talking about one particular block where we brought a case to this to the subcommittee that we replaced the Douglas fir with pine as an alternative species, but that hasn't happened yet. But Mr. Grant's summary at the back is replacing everything with Indigenous.
Okay, it just doesn't say that, so I'm just checking. And in our AMP it says permanent forest cover consisting mainly, it actually says native forest there. I think it should say Indigenous, so maybe we could just be consistent throughout and start using the word Indigenous.
Okay, well, I think Mr. Grant.
Thank you, that's really good.
Comment. Any other questions?
No.
Councillor Skinner, I just want to say, you're talking about page 82, we've got replanted with native. I understand the alternative was keeping open to whatever was the best species for a place, but native, I'm very comfortable with native, and that is the correct terminology. I'm not sure why we want to change it to Indigenous. They both mean the same, but native is what commonly used.
Yeah, understand. I think Mr. Grant's got the point, and he'll adjust accordingly as he figures it out.
We're not changing native to Indigenous.
I don't think so, no. But having said that,
look, it's a really interesting question, really, but it's probably deserves a line or two. But you go to any of the nurseries and they talk about the species as native species. They don't talk about them as Indigenous species.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right. I'm happy to move that we receive the report. Seconded. Oh, sorry. Actually, I rescind that.
I said I switched on. Yeah.
I'd like to invite Councillor Skinner to move the report.
I'm happy for you to move it if you wish.
Oh, too late. You were moving it.
I'll move it. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Skinner, seconded by Mayor Rees. Thank you. Oh, me. Seconded by me. So I've got it all wrong. You okay over there? Right. So I'm happy to second it. Right. Any debate on the report?
Just thank you again for the good work and detailed reports and being here to answer questions. It's all part of our learning curve and it's good for the public to hear it from the coalface. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, I reiterate that. Mayor Rees.
Thank you for the very nice pictures of the bridge. Really appreciate that. Been waiting a long time for that bridge. That's lovely to see it.
And just a quick question to Sam. Sam, that bridge also, not only is there logging trucks, benefits these others, isn't there, Sam? Just remind me of...
good safety for recreation. In the case of a flood, they can exit the areas. So, yeah.
And also fire safety in case there's a fire up there for the...
Yep.
Okay, so it's got wider use, which is really cool.
And control it, so not driving through the river.
Yes, absolutely. So on that note, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Well, that leaves me to close the meeting. Again, thank you, Mr. Levitas. I appreciate that you're working in some very high pressure times. So we appreciate your integration with the committee and everything else. So thank you very, very much. To the team, thank you, team. Without your expertise, as Mr. Skinner said, we would be the worse off for it. And thank you, Councillor Fulton, Mayor, and Councillor Skinner for attending, and also Councillor Sanson for her interest in being here for the first bit. Very much appreciated. And of course, the powerhouse. Thank you very much. We'll declare the meeting closed. Have a nice Christmas, everyone.